market when the Chinese would come up, and they had everything. They had ice cream from China all the way to Siberia. They had clothing, furniture,
They're their
food.
main distributor.
They were selling everything.
And that's how the world will be evolving very soon.
Yeah, and after yesterday.
That's right. Well, in truth, yeah.
Let's begin.
I mean,
And you're the only member of the audience, so you go first. I had decided this before coming here. I'm Arlene Richards, I'm Colonel Richards, and I'm the chair. And I'm supposed to parcel out the time, 15 minutes for each of us, and the rest of the time for discussion. And I decided before coming here that it would be a good idea to start with discussion and then see how much time is left over for the rest of us. So, you're up.
I'm off.
Yes,
You're
yes.
What?
Ask us.
Why are you here? What are you interested in learning about? What would you like us to talk about?
Well, part of the reason I'm here is because of Margaret, because I knew she was working in China.
Yes,
And
okay.
We've had many discussions. I know you from Washington Square.
Yeah. I don't know you. Your name is?
Gilda Graff. I'm also the vice president of IPA.
Uh-huh.
So I was just curious and really interesting to me. And I was at a workshop yesterday with a Chinese woman whose name I don't remember, and a black man who are artists. They're married and they're artists. And she was talking about, she was born in China, and she was talking about, I don't know how many years ago, but, well, certainly, around the Cultural Revolution, and after that, they all walked around with no expressions on their face. They couldn't let anything show. And to me, that was really fascinating.
This was before or after the Cultural Revolution?
After.
After.
Yeah, people were in shell shock.
Ah.
They were totally terrified of everything, of each other mostly. Terrified of being denounced, terrified of being put in jail, terrified of being sent to the countryside to starve to death, terrified of everything. Because those who went to the countryside were mostly intellectuals and entrepreneurs and landlords.
Right,
They had no skills at all that the farmers could use. So the farmers weren't going to share their scarce food with these useless people. And many of them starved to death.
And families sent lots of children there very young. And everybody was torn out of school because it was anti-intellectual, anti-professional, anti-knowing a craft even. It was so
Even
radical.
embroidery was forbidden.
Yeah, everything was all amassed to the power of the Communist Party and this creation of this image. And what's happened, and one of the things I was going to talk about is that there is the symptoms and some of the resistances and some of the problems of coping with a new life now, where there's a lot of entrepreneurial, a lot of achievement, a lot of education, is that there are signs of intergenerational transmission of collective historical trauma, which is the parents went through and experienced.
And now the grandparents.
I mean, grandparents, the parents and grandparents,
generations
yeah.
of trauma.
But the continuation of the repressive nature, the fear of survival in various forms, through various forms of generations, begins to explode with this new group of, this new generation
This
of
happens
millennials.
everywhere where there's trauma.
Because of the culture changing now.
Transgenerational. Wherever there's transgenerational trauma, there is a fear that the old bad days can come back. And there's a sense that you cannot trust anyone and you cannot trust any government or any organization at all.
So
So paranoia is adaptive.
The idea that in development, that you start to deal with trauma as an interrupter of mental functions, what you see in your students is a shallowness, a diminishment, and what you see in their patients is an impoverishment of personality. You read about how badly they were treated, not with cruel intent, but because the parents had no frustration tolerance and didn't know how to be parents, because their parents were either taken or they were also struggling for food. It's just the impact is incredible. And when you look at a Chinese mainland person, for the most part, a country, a peasant, and you look at a Taiwanese peasant, the personalities are so different in terms of just the connectedness, the way they relate.
Because the Taiwanese have
Not had the
those
trauma. Right.
generations. They had one major trauma, which was
5
being
generations ago,
moved.
and it was healed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a good way to look engaged. But a lot of the responses that we work with, either through teaching or through therapy, you don't guess right away, but they're actually results of trauma. There's deep traumatization, which is often disassociated and not reachable, because it's often even the families themselves have been hurt for they don't talk about this among themselves, so that there's no venue, or there are few, depending on who you're working with. It's quite
It's my experience with my supervisees who treat their patients is they so often present a case where they've had a horrendous growing up in terms of abandonment and abuse and so forth. And sometimes what I find is helpful is to encourage the therapist to think about, given the terribleness of their background, how did the patient do as well as they have? To look for what was positive in this very traumatic background. And it's quite remarkable what someone would come up with, because there was always an uncle or someone else or some experience. And the idea is that to help the person build on that positive experience while they're dealing with the terrible trauma.
It's interesting. I think you're right on the money. I think there are 2 other elements, though.
Yes?
One is innate intelligence. So many survive
Yes,
because
that's true.
they could read the environment young.
Right.
And the other is defiance.
Is the what?
An internal sense of defiance,
Yeah.
but not demonstrate.
Right.
Just, I'll go along. But there's always something that they do that
Which becomes part of their identity and their coping mechanism in the world now.
Right.
Yeah. For example,
Yes.
I had supervision today
Yes.
with a therapist who said, I'm disgusted with this patient. I want to get rid of him. How do I do it? He's been coming for 3 years. He comes every week. He comes on time. He pays on time. And he has, well, she thought nothing happened.
Yeah.
He pays, and he asked me last week, do you think I've changed? And I don't think he's changed at all. I told him, no, you're the same way. And his symptom was he can't work. He can't work partly because he doesn't have to work. He's from a peasant family and the government bought their lands to build an apartment building and gave them a huge amount of money. They can't spend it in their lifetime, the amount of money that they gave them. So he doesn't have to work. On the other hand, he has grandiose ideas. He's not educated. He can't do a job that an educated person could do. So he was given a job when he finished middle school of delivering packages. And he regards this as very shameful, and he won't do it. He won't do it. So she feels, the therapist feels, that she's a complete, that he is a complete failure, that he can't mentalize, he can't empathize, he can't, on and on, a list of things that come from psychoanalytic theory, but have nothing to do with the case. Very interesting psychoanalytic theory. You know this person. Very, very smart person. And so we talked about how much of this is intergenerational. His grandfather was sent to the countryside. That's how they have the land. And in fact, they rent, the government owns all the land in China, but you can rent it for how many years? 80
For
years, something like that.
100 years, but then you can keep your house, but you have to get back the land.
That's right.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
they've
so-
also
so
lowered the
anyway.
years now. The number of them,
It's a very strange system.
yeah. They're renters on the land,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah,
the
but
government
they're
can have
entitled to
control.
that land. It's their land, and if the government takes it away to build, then they pay them
Buy it
for it.
back.
They buy back the lease, in other words.
It's an interesting sense of security in some way, too.
Yeah, and insecurity, you don't
As
own
well,
anything
both.
real.
You don't own anything, you're totally dependent on the government, but it's a nice deal.
And
For
it's
temper,
real.
depending on the
Yeah.
government.
Yeah. So,
I'm just curious, I know that's the current situation. Do you have any idea when that went into effect? Because,
it went into effect in the 1960s.
okay. In the 1950s, they had the land taken away from all the landowners
Yes,
and given to peasants.
rented it.
I read given. but-
Yeah, you read given
Okay,
because
all
they
right.
have a 100-year lease.
Okay,
So that's like given, they
Yeah.
can use it.
yeah.
But we're talking, hi, you are?
Okay.
I'm Ken.
Oh, my God.
Okay, so he'll be next.
I've had
Arlene.
some, I've had some facial operations, so you can't recognize me.
Arlene,
You look younger and better.
Arlene, he'll be next, okay?
He'll be next.
Next.
Okay,
Okay.
you get to talk next. Okay, but I'm so sorry, so.
Yeah, we're still talking, but you're next.
Okay.
You didn't finish though.
I didn't finish. So I tried very gently to explain to her that sometimes as a therapist, we have ambitions. We want to make our patients better. And when they don't seem to us to be getting better, that's very discouraging. We don't like those patients because they make us feel bad. They make us feel like we can't work. We can't do our work. Does this remind you of your patient? And your patient is trying to show you how it feels to be unable to do work. His presenting complaint was that he couldn't work. So we talked a little bit about how hard it is to feel empathy for someone who's telling you that you're useless and bad and all that. On the other hand, he comes to therapy to work on something, and he comes every week, he comes on time, and he pays for it. This is a huge change from his inability to work. You have done a very good job. And the therapist was astounded and said, I see you're going to make me work on empathy. And she was right. So this is what working with patients in China is like, and what working with the therapists there who try to help these patients is like. It's a very, very slow process of doing things like saying attendance counts, not contradicting everything the patient says counts, being willing to learn from the patient what his world is like counts, and theory comes way after all that.
And being aware of the feeling you get from the way the patient is acting,
Yes.
because it may open up in you perhaps the same thing.
Yes.
That you're
Exactly.
you may be, it's transference, you may be overreacting
The
to something
countertransference
that
is
you're
your best.
keeping deep in your heart and have not yet explored perhaps, and you have to be more aware of your body and the feelings you have as you're sitting in the room, because it's giving you messages too, in terms of your own discomfort. And when you have discomfort, this is a great sign to explore and be more conscious of something going on with you.
So,
We've changed the procedure.
And the
Instead of
procedure.
presenting, we've decided to have the question answered at the beginning.
Okay.
So we ask the people in the audience
Okay.
to ask questions and to talk, and then we'll respond.
Okay. All right. So, how did this venue of coming to China,
How did what?
how did it happen?
how did it happen?
How did
It happened, I got a phone call from someone who had read a paper of mine on the internet. And it was on female sexuality.
Okay.
And this person said, we have a big problem with young women suiciding in China, and we need help with how to do psychotherapy with these women, because we don't have enough young women, because we kill too many of the baby girls. So we're already short on women, and these young women are suiciding much too much, particularly those whose parents are leaders in the government.
And who was the person who called you? Was an analyst there?
No, she wasn't an analyst at the time, she's an analyst now.
Okay,
Dr. Tan,
Dr. Khan. Okay.
June Tan, who was the vice president, you know June Tan, yes.
Oh my goodness.
How do you know her?
She's the vice president of the hospital in charge of outpatient
Okay,
psychotherapy.
so this was a godsend to her,
To her.
reading this paper because it was such a big problem for the whole society.
Yes,
Right,
yes, but
especially-
particularly for the leadership.
Right, yes,
Peasant girls don't suicide.
okay, right, yeah, having any suicide in one's family.
Yeah, it's a very bad thing.
And,
And many people suicided during the Cultural Revolution,
Especially we don't
particularly
have too many
intellectuals.
children.
Pardon?
Especially when you don't have too many children.
You only have the one
Well,
child.
and it
Right.
should be a boy.
Yeah, and so if it's a
Right. That's a long
girl,
tradition.
no, now it should be
Now,
a girl.
now it's
Now
two,
it's-
they
yeah.
changed the
It
policy.
should be a girl now, because boys
That's
are
right,
too
'cause they have-
expensive now. In order to
Yeah.
get a wife, you have to provide your son with an apartment and a car and an expensive
A
education.
Chinese wife, yeah.
Right.
To get a
Because
Chinese
they-
wife.
They do a lot of outsourcing and
Yeah.
internet looking like crazy. I have one patient who's looked for 4 years, 5 years for a wife because his mother is going, and his grandma going crazy that they don't have another male heir,
Oh,
the
right.
only male in the family. It's
Yeah.
huge, huge pressure.
So this invitation was very nice, and I wanted to go, but the invitation to go to Wuhan and teach.
Okay.
But I said, I really can't leave my husband,
Okay.
and he doesn't even know how to cook or anything.
And you told them that?
Well, Arlene will tell you how I got there.
Yeah, and so they said, well, if you can't leave him, send his CV. And he has a very nice CV. They said, we'll take him.
And that's a good, that's a good idea.
Yes.
Yes,
great
that was
idea.
smart.
So they got both of us, and we
Okay.
went and we lectured for 2 weeks. We each gave
Okay.
5 lectures, and we did supervisions, and
Wow.
they were very happy. And at the end of the 2 weeks, they gave us a dinner that's like a banquet type dinner like they do in Russia, where they do these little cups of liquor and you have to
Okay. Oh, I see.
drink to everybody, and you
Right.
can put it in the teacup, you don't have to drink it, but you give all these toasts and everything, and I got seated next to the governor of the province.
From the head of the Communist Party.
He was, yeah, he was the
Right.
communist guy. They have like 2 people for each job, one who
Okay.
does the technical stuff, and one who was the commissar. He was the
Party,
commissar.
the party.
The party guy, making sure that everything,
And how long ago was this?
8 years ago.
8 years ago now.
And what made it appealing for you both to go, and how, have you been to that part of the world before?
Well, let me tell you when we went the
Yes,
first
we had
time.
been there before,
Okay.
and I only learned recently what made it so appealing for me, but you
Yeah,
go first.
well, what? Tell me. You say it. What made it so appealing?
Who's so sweet?
During the Second World War, when I was a little girl, there was only one country that protected the Jews and didn't charge them for visas and gave them housing and food, even though their own people were starving.
Yeah, and save them in Shanghai.
And there was a whole Jewish community in Shanghai. And I had come from a family from Poland, and everybody was exterminated, so it mattered to me a lot that these people had saved my people, not my relatives. But
So that was something you wanted to do?
I always wanted to be with them and be near them
But,
and say thank you.
by the way, you know, I just had recently the feeling, I'll tell you how when we went the first time, is that how wonderful it was to be in a country where there's no anti-Semitism,
And never has been.
and never has
Isn't that,
been.
isn't that amazing? It's
There's
understandable.
no other country
It's
in
understandable.
the world that I know of
Uh-huh.
that there is, I don't know, maybe Bhutan, I don't know.
Sri Lanka.
But,
Sri Lanka.
yeah, and there's something very special about that, but that's beside the point. We first went there in 1978.
Oh, okay.
Very interesting experience because it was a trip organized by the American Psychoanalytic Association.
Okay, I've heard of them.
What?
Yes.
Well, we've heard of
They
them.
did it.
And they had heard of them, and that's part of the story.
Okay.
Because, and it was a very interesting group. They were half analysts, you know, Arlene and me and several of them. Margaret Brennan Gill was on the trip,
Okay.
remember? I mean, she's incredible. And so they were half analysts and half ordinary folk. And so we were going, and the day we left was the beginning of the Iranian Revolution. And we were going on Air Iran because the idea was that we would do sightseeing in Isfahan and so forth. And of course, Air Iran went on strike, so we had a problem getting to Iran, and we got there in the middle of the, you know, of the Iranian Revolution.
This sounds like a movie.
It was a movie, and Arlene and Henry Rosner went downtown. She wanted to see the crown jewels.
In Tehran, yeah.
And she went through a mob, and they told her, you have to get down in the taxi cab because they will kill us.
They'll kill you,
Yeah, and
This is a movie.
yeah,
This is
right, it is a movie. I decided to stay in the hotel, and
My
you know,
God.
and so,
That's exciting.
and then, but somehow we did get out of. We had to then go to Air Ethiopia and Air India, and ended up in Beijing. And just to jump ahead, we had to go back through Iran,
Okay.
and we were the last plane to leave Tehran. And there we were in the middle of the airport. There was no one there, this cavernous
No planes,
space.
no people,
And
nothing.
no people, one plane, and there was one caviar salesman. And Arlene,
plane and a
and
caviar.
Arlene, there was a great shopper bought a pound of caviar for
For
nothing,
$50.
which we ate.
You go all the way when you shop.
Yeah, yeah.
Have
But, so,
Yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
So we get to Beijing,
All right.
and we're met by the translator, Mr. Liu. And Mr. Liu had translated for Nixon and Mao.
Okay.
Because
So it
they
sounds like he's
decided,
qualified.
Yeah.
that the American Psychoanalytic Association was very important.
More important than Nixon.
Right, and so they gave us the #1 translator, and they put us in the #1 hotel, which was the Russian hotel.
Yes.
So we arrived there, and Mr. Liu says to us, first we take you to change your money, and then we take you to the cleaners.
That's a classic statement.
And then they proceed to sell us everything they could think of, jade and scroll.
Oh, okay, so,
And this
He
was the
meant it.
beginning of the
It's amazing.
accumulation of dollars in '78 was the beginning.
78.
And here they are, I think, $3 trillion later.
so when are you writing this up?
This is not only a movie, it's a comedy. It's
Well,
a tragic comedy. It's amazing.
So there we were, there we were in Beijing. We went to Beijing, Shanghai, and Hangzhou.
Okay.
Hangzhou is gorgeous, Westlake, but when we came back, the contrast is incredible. No cars, only bicycles, everyone wearing the
Right.
same clothes and so
Right.
on. But then we went to the Shanghai Mental Hospital, the number one.
This is in '78 or when you came
78,
back?
That must
78.
have been incredible.
And there we were, Henry Rosser and us, and so we went there and we had a case conference. And they presented a case to us. And the person in charge of this hospital, extremely knowledgeable. He said he subscribed to JAPA. He wanted to know what's new in psychoanalysis. He wanted to know about Margaret Mahler.
Of course.
Remember? Margaret
Yes.
Mahler? And they presented this case.
Yeah,
Of a disturbed lady, and they said, we...
A lady.
A lady.
She was a lady who was in menopause.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Remember? And she was very depressed, and
Yeah.
her husband couldn't understand why she was so depressed because they had enough food and everything.
And they said, we treat our patients with heart-to-heart talk and Haldol.
Haldol.
Great.
Haldol, that was
Oh
the
my
the
God.
medication of the day.
That's a great,
Right,
that's
I
a
do
great line.
remember that.
Yeah, heart-to-heart
Easy to
talk.
get
I mean, heart to heart and
That's
elbow.
right.
Right.
The
And
three,
so
the three.
they
Oh,
presented
yes.
the case, and we discussed it, and what I noticed very much is how much they involve the community in the treatment, right? And the workplace, the family place,
Okay.
unlike, our approach. So that was how we first get to China, and I certainly always wanted to go back.
Have you thought of writing, you guys thought of writing this first experience up?
Well, I
We
have,
should.
I'll
We
say, I
Oh,
wrote
you
something,
have?
yeah, in this.
It's in
Yeah.
there.
But let me just say,
And
yes.
the other thing, the second, are you still on the first?
No, I'm finished with the first thing.
Okay.
Okay.
The other thing, so we go to this banquet,
Uh-huh.
and this communist chieftain is
Right.
sitting beside me. What do I know how to talk to such a person? I say, tell me about yourself. So he starts to tell me that his ambition is to retire and become the nanny to his daughter's baby.
Oh.
Because he has missed family life all through his climb up
Right.
in the echelons. And he never knew his daughter, and he feels
Oh,
he's
God.
missed an important part of life. And so I tell him I was brought up by a grandfather and how wonderful that was, which is absolutely true. And that
Right.
I felt strange because the other kids would say, where's your mother? How come you don't have a mother? And I read a book by Johanna Spry called Heidi. Heidi is a story of a little girl who goes to the Alm, and her grandfather takes care of her, and she becomes well, and she heals him, and he heals her, and it's all wonderful. And then I didn't feel weird. There was someone else like me. And he said, is this what you do? And I said, yeah, this is what I do. He said, this is a very good thing. I will build you a hospital.
A
Seriously,
10-story
in
modern
6
hospital
months?
for psychotherapy.
So, has anybody else ever
It's the
said,
Wuhan Mental Hospital.
Wuhan, of course.
Yes, that gorgeous hospital.
Famous
The
hospital.
beautiful, famous hospital.
so has anybody else you've ever talked to and they felt what you said was nice and
So
told you they'll build you a hospital?
You are very,
It's
Or
better than
anything
sending
else?
flowers. I mean, it's really good.
you're very authentic and convincing.
That's amazing.
It's a beautiful
It's
story.
amazing but true.
You
Even
guys
movies?
need to write your memoirs.
Yeah. So then, at this very same trip, they sent me to the to work on the closed ward,
Okay.
on the closed ward of the hospital, and they said that you will do group psychotherapy with the patients.
Okay.
So I had a group. I think we had 5 sessions, about an hour and a half each, with all the, the patient, the psychotic patients, and the staff.
Okay.
I hadn't done group psychotherapy since I was in the prison service in Petersburg, Virginia.
Yeah.
But, what do I know? So, we talked and we talked, and, it was fine. And so we had 4 sessions. And then before the 5th session, I said to him, look, I would like you to come back tomorrow and tell us your earliest memory.
Okay.
And so they came back and they did, and one person talked about their earliest memory. They were 6 years old, and they saw his grandfathers kill themselves, suicide. And so there was a very, it was a very emotional session as people talked about their past. And then there was a kind of a good feeling, and then one of the members in the group said, okay, I'm going to sing a song for you. Apparently that's done in China. So she sang a Chinese song. And then apparently there had been 2 people in the group who were vying for my attention. And so there was the other one said, okay, but I'm going to sing a Chinese classical song. Not a populist song, that's at a higher level. So she sings her song, and then they say to me, now you have to sing a song.
And so what's your repertoire with Chinese songs?
Well, so I had to think of a song that I knew the words to.
Okay.
And I can only think of one song that I knew the words to, and the song is An Anarchistic Garret. You know that song?
No, I don't, but I know that was a top 40 song.
Yeah, right.
An anarchistic garret, so meager and so mean, spell the pungent odor of nitroglycerine. They're busy making fuses and filling cans with lead, while the little Slavic children send up this mournful wail. It's Sister Jenny's turn to throw the bomb. I mean,
How old were you when you learned that song?
Arlene, when did we learn that? Was it a Tom Lehrer song?
Yes, Tom
That's a Tom Lehrer song.
Yeah.
Okay.
We learned it in college.
But
All right,
you
I know
have to
Tom
know
Lehrer. I don't know that
his
song, I know
father-
Tom
Yeah, so, I mean, I know Chinese, communist, so I sang that song. And then the next thing that happened is they all stood up, and we all together sang the International.
Yeah, the International.
Okay.
All together. And of course I knew in English the end, shall be the human race.
Right.
And it was an incredibly emotional experience, and all they could say to us and to me, when are you coming back? So then the rest was up to Arlene.
So then we set up with this man and Dr. Tang and me a plan for how to teach psychotherapy over a 3-year period with 2 weeks a year.
Okay.
In China,
Yeah, in China, 2 sessions, a spring and a fall session.
6 sessions altogether.
So 6 sessions to learn psychotherapy. And we hired staff, because it couldn't be just the 2 of us, because when the word went out that this was available, literally thousands of people wanted it, and 200,
204.
around 200, a little over 200 were accepted into the program.
Like 198 or 199 graduated.
Yeah, and practically everybody graduated,
Which is quite
except the
remarkable.
ones who got
That is
pregnant
remarkable.
or
And
whatever.
they're incredible students.
And
They
they're
are.
such good
Absolutely.
students, their questions are so
Very
smart.
The interest.
So each of us have to give 2 papers every year, which is an opportunity to write papers. And it's,
And the rest of the faculty sees these students in personal experiences and psychotherapy sessions, so they get their own experience of that during the morning.
and Art came for the second.
Okay, that's what I was about,
The second, and we had a full staff then. We had 7 people.
Yeah.
7 Western people
Western.
and 7
And
Chinese.
7 Chinese. And the schedule went, in the morning was the lecture and the personal experience, and then from 12 to 5, or 12:15 to 5, was supervision. and they would present cases. And we would respond to them. We each had a group of 25
20,
to,
yeah, 20, 25 people.
And then in the evening, the students would go back to the Chinese faculty and hear more lectures. So they went from about 8 in the morning till about 9 at night.
That's the Chinese way.
Straight through, every
And
day.
they were coming from all over the country. It
Right.
wasn't just in
They would be
Wuhan.
coming
So
in
they
by
were
bus.
very eager to get as much as they could
Right.
in as short a time as possible in order to go back to their hospital. The students were all psychiatrists.
I'm sorry, but I have to go get things.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Oh, excuses, excuses. And you, how did you first?
You have a different kind of
I am a
experience.
different background, different experience, but I'm so in sync actually in terms of this wonderful history. I'm delighted because I haven't heard all of it. I
Okay.
actually have some patients in Wuhan, but also and know about them, but didn't know that they were the ones running the program in the hospital.
Okay.
I have spent 6 years in working with Chinese American Psychoanalytic Alliance, CAPA.
Okay.
I've taught all the programs, the 3 years of programs, and I've been to China 3 times. I've given keynotes in 4 universities each time. And I teach a year of supervision, advanced supervision for the graduates, which is my new thing because I wanted to do something like that. And I have many analyzans, and I still have supervisees who still want to consult with me. I do, you know, obviously it's on either Zoom or Skype,
I see.
and I spend a third of my professional time volunteering.
Oh.
One, I wanted to find out, I've traveled a lot, a great deal in my life. I'm also a sociologist and an analyst, and I've worked in medicine, every area. So I've done a lot of things in my past life, and I've traveled a lot. So the one thing I didn't know, and I haven't had any experience, was Asia, and I wanted to understand Chinese, and what's the best way to understand anyone is to see someone with their issues and problems and sit with them. And so Kappa did offer me that for me to, you know, learn, literally. But I got hooked in terms of China. I'm crazy about China. I love working with the patients, the students. I have, you know, I have my own thoughts in terms of issues and how to
I'm
handle
gonna move
things.
closer.
Sure.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so I come from a background, not extensive as in terms of the hospital, but I've spent probably many years. I was at the City University of New York, a professor. I'm a master teacher. I've taught in 3 fields.
Okay.
And I got tired of teaching here. I thought there was a dumbing of America, literally.
Right.
And I was excited by the kind of intensity, interest, and excitement that these students had from China.
And did you guys?
First time I
First
have
time
seen
we got
today. No, I've seen them. You know, in
Okay.
conferences, but
Right.
this is like for me a small little miracle. It's beautiful because I just love hearing about, and I know indirectly about the hospital, like in great detail. I mean, I really do. So it's interesting.
You know about the second hospital.
Yeah,
The
I don't know
first
about the
hospital,
first.
although built in 1985, could have been built in 1785. It was a
No
a
elevator.
nightmare.
No
I
elevator.
can
And
believe
the
that.
stairs were curved,
Curved,
stone.
But it's
dangerous.
amazing how quickly they
God.
built the next hospital. It
It was
ama-
6 months.
6
Yeah.
months.
No,
They
infrastructure.
bought an entire village except one perimeter, and everybody moved. And then they went in.
They pay them to
Right.
move, and they
Pay
give
them.
them a new
They-
apartment.
They
No,
give
it
them
is.
everything. They give them a life's worth of income. And then they all left, and they built these 2 wonderful buildings. in 6 months to a year.
Yeah,
Amazing.
and they landscaped it
Yeah.
in another year or two.
Yeah.
It's
You
gorgeous.
know, going to China every 2 years, not every year, it's so,
It's amazing.
it's shocking, it's disorienting, because the cities change so radically. The building up the infrastructure, the quality of the airport is built for billions of people, and everything's free in it. You know, the ease to travel once you're there, it's just extraordinary. It's a great learning experience.
And you've been doing it for how long?
6 years.
6 years. Now Lowenberg, Peter Lowenberg, right?
Yes.
Yes.
He did independently of you guys, or?
He's the IPA.
Yeah,
Okay.
he works with us, and he came
So,
to our
so-
conference.
So, was he doing independently and then you hooked up, or
Yeah.
just? Okay.
Yeah. No, we know him for a long time. He was in your
Yeah,
CAPS
he was in
group.
my CAPS group. I've known him for
Oh, okay.
40 years.
Okay.
I know Peter for a long, long time.
We're trying to get him here next year.
Oh, good.
Great.
He'd be terrific.
Yeah.
He's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what else?
An old line of mine.
Yeah.
How much is that doggy in the window?
Ah.
Okay, so it started out as 2 weeks, the second time. The first time was 2 weeks in '78, and then it was.
No, not in 78.
No.
78, we went for 3
78, we
weeks,
just
which
went, the
is
two of us.
as tourists.
Okay,
No, but
for
with
tourists.
the American Psychoanalytic.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so then the first time
Then the
was-
first year, just the two of us went.
Right, and that was 90,
No, that was 2000?
2000?
2000, what, 6?
6, yeah.
Okay, so
And
it
then
was
the
like-
3-year program started, I guess, in '07? Or whatever it was.
08.
08. And it was 3 years, twice a year for 3 years.
Have you ever done anything comparable to this anywhere else?
Yes, I got the idea from Smith College School of Social Work.
Okay,
Which
gotcha.
has a similar
Right.
kind of program with come intensely for the summer.
Right, right.
I used to teach in their PhD program.
Okay, so you had a model for it.
Yeah.
Marianne will be very happy to hear that this was modeled.
Yeah,
That's-
that was the experience that made me convinced that it could be done. I loved Smith. I was there 16 years.
But it evolved too, beyond what Smith does.
Oh, yeah.
We went there the first year after the 2-year period
Yeah.
that Ronnie and Arlene went alone.
Right.
The faculty came in and we met with them for a year, twice. And the
You said the
second part,
faculty came in, it was one of your visits that they were there.
it was a group of 7 American faculty.
And 1 Australian.
1 Australian
Okay.
and 7
7
Chinese faculty.
Okay.
And so it became a big program to meet the demand.
Right.
But we felt there was a gap in the 6-month, in the 2-week, 6-month,
Right.
2-week period. And we started, the students started asking, can we do supervision with you over Skype?
Okay.
So then we went to weekly supervision in between. So there was this continuum of learning throughout the year.
And so how many people would you be supervising over Skype?
25 to 30.
Between the 7 faculty?
No,
each.
each.
Right
It's
now,
a group
I have,
supervision.
okay.
One person presents and the other
Okay.
20 listen
I have 2
and ask
groups.
questions.
2 groups. One has 27 and the other has 31. So I have 58 students together right now. Each meets once a week, each group once a week. And one is only supervision, and the other is supervision and theory. And one of them has been going on for 7 years, and the other is this first year.
So Arnie was telling me about developing the list of 50 essential psychoanalytic articles.
Right.
Yes.
Did I send it to you?
You did, or either you did or to Margaret. But I
Jeffrey Lewis is waiting. Yeah.
okay,
We're,
I'm the only one here, so then that's why I'm here.
yeah, that makes
He came up with the idea of starting a course 50 essential papers in psychoanalysis. They will translate them to Chinese,
Oh, okay.
and we'll have 50 sessions.
Oh, that's something.
It's
Right.
wonderful.
So I came up with a list of 50 papers, and you're included.
Good.
What's included? I killed 2 birds with 1 stone.
Ah,
Your review of Steve Ellman,
wonderful.
which is
Because
one of
your
the best
review is
things
better
you
than
did.
the book.
It's one of the best things. Ellman
Don't tell
is.
that to him, he'll
I
never.
have told
he'll
him,
hate
and he
me.
agrees.
He agrees.
And he hates you for it.
Yeah.
Oh, isn't that, it's good to be hated that
Yes,
way.
yeah.
So you know what this reminds me of?
Yes.
When you had the group teaching, going through Freud, that art was.
Yes.
That's
Right,
right.
right.
It's the same thing.
That's
Right.
always-
Okay, and then I've also been asked by someone from Tianjin, this other guy, he wants me to teach a course on from Freud, ego psychology, and contemporary conflict theory.
Ah.
And this is the course that's already on the
It's
internet,
already on
and
the
he's
internet.
soliciting people to join, so I may
Right.
teach that. But the,
And we have a third course that's
Oh, yeah.
in the works.
in the
with
work
Echo.
with Echo, right?
Right.
But
Echo is a woman who was a promoter
Uh-huh.
who got Arnie involved in presenting a paper on transference for free on the internet.
Okay.
And they expected a good turnout. They got 58,000.
38,000.
58.
58.
58,000 hits came in. The counter
This is
was
incredible.
having a problem stopping, but it was an amazing
Okay.
response.
That's a
Yeah,
phenomenon.
yeah, this came out, we were talking about this the other day.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
That's
Well, they
But
have so
what's
much
interesting-
trauma, they need.
For-
Is it
but
the
what's-
desperation?
But what's interesting, because of the 3 of us,
Right.
Absolutely.
3 of us have made contemporary conflict
How about-
theory, the theory in China. Right? So
Official theory of the
Let me
People's
just- let me
Republic.
just-
no more beyond.
No more
So,
beyond,
you know-
hooray.
You know what it's
That's
gonna be?
amazing.
You guys are gonna get investigated for this at some point.
It's just a question of which government.
So it's fascinating, it really is.
Yeah.
And
It's wild.
We're not going to start a back channel.
It's already been
Oh, I
changed,
shouldn't
but
have
it's,
done that.
but it's,
But you see, the people, they need something to idealize and to identify with. They need to call themselves something, and that's very important.
so
We
besides,
become role models in terms of theoretical role models.
so this all started with the suicide concern,
Right.
and then,
The concern of the people in charge and the government was their children were killing
so
themselves.
then,
But let's take it back to
Okay.
10 years to Tiananmen Square and the
Right.
problems there.
Yes.
And how the government, through the extreme boom in the free marketplace, and it
Right.
became extremely wealthy and was started to build wildly.
right,
There are beautiful, beautiful buildings in China, and there are also empty cities in China because they
oh, really?
haven't filled them yet.
Oh, they built them, but they're new,
They're new,
like
and so
Brazil, what was the place in Brazil that?
Brasilia.
Brasilia, right.
Brasilia.
Okay.
so you have that combination
Right.
with a forgetting, with the Beijing Games in 2008,
Right,
and a forgetting of the frustration and unrest that the students in Tiananmen Square had,
okay.
and of the terrible outcome.
So how is the
So
rule of?
psychoanalysis, in my response, is a compromise formation for that.
Yeah,
It buries it, and yet it still tries to
yeah,
get
it
at
still
the real
contains
thing.
it.
Yeah, right, and the dissent is in the consulting room rather than in the street.
So that's part, so that's one of the motivations
I think they're
also,
aware, yes.
is social control.
Social control.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, it's a
Yeah.
compromise formation.
It is, and it's programmatic
Right.
Okay.
from
But
a
it's a
princess.
healthy one in a sense,
Right,
because they're
right.
giving expression to what has been tormenting them without acting it out in massive ways. Every case that comes in has children who have been beaten through most of their
Exactly.
life. And that's not the bad part. The bad part is that when the parents don't do it out of affection, it becomes monstrous.
I see.
And that becomes really sort of
It's the elephant
Okay,
in
so-
the room.
Yeah.
So those are other elements that aren't as evident, that don't fit into the social control aspect of it.
No,
But it,
no.
but,
Lead to suicide and or acting in.
but I was thinking also what the legacy of the Cultural Revolution is and how much, as well as Tiananmen Square, you know.
It's getting played out intergenerationally.
Right.
And
Okay.
this, psychiatry and psychoanalysis is the one container, I think, that can be offered. Also, the government has a program for teaching happiness. Big lectures, mass
I'm
lectures.
going.
So there's a lot of,
We're all
there's a
going.
lot
You know,
of,
we do get a lot of flack
there's a lot
for
of planning.
teaching, for doing this in China.
Right.
You know, people say,
Right.
how can you do this in a
That's
authoritarian?
But,
I don't have a problem.
but one of the other things I'm thinking, is there any other government who's ever adopted psychoanalysis as a means of dealing with the issues they have at the scale that's happening?
Not at this scale, but Germany did.
Germany did,
When?
what was that?
You mean in the,
In the 50s and 60s, when they started
oh, yes.
paying
Yeah, they
for
paid for psychoanalysis as part of
Oh,
insurance.
okay.
Yeah, that was
as
very
part
positive.
of
Oh,
government
okay.
insurance program, and Holland, and England, and Australia. There
Okay.
were quite a few, but not on
That
this scale.
supported
Yeah.
psychoanalysis.
But not on,
Supported.
but not on.
Also, Canada does support psychoanalysis
Okay.
in their clinics.
Right.
Yes.
They're
Well,
very
I was in
strong.
the
Okay.
we were supported
But this-
by insurance.
But this, I mean, if
That's
you
just
have
the
30
health system.
Well, who gave you
Okay,
the
it's the health
insurance?
system rather
Who
than
paid for
The
the
government.
social policy,
Right.
not only to help, not only to deal with individual problems, but to deal
So
with
it was,
culture-wide problems.
Yeah.
That's more, I mean, it was prevented.
I mean, so Arlene, do you think that what was going on in the other countries you talked about is not only the size, but as well as paying for individual therapy, but as a way of us dealing with collectively dealing with social, psychological issues?
Because they don't have that kind of government that feels it's
Paternalistic.
role to decide what's good for the people.
And the concern of billions of people, of
Right.
management of it
Right.
seriously, long-term, and programmatically.
So where have you written up about this?
not at all.
It'll be coming soon.
We should,
Well,
as a result of talking about this.
Let
Let
I
me
think
ask you this,
also-
I'll make you an offer you can't refuse.
Okay.
Okay, could I get the videos of all these sessions and I'll put them on the blog with
Yeah,
permission?
yeah, so, yes, so, right, so I have to get permission from each of the people.
Right.
But then, so Ina, so I don't know how long it's gonna take her to do it.
But I will upload them and
Okay.
post them on the blog,
Okay.
and that'll be available to the whole world.
So let me then propose the following to you.
Yeah,
That we have a phone, I'm the president of this group.
right.
I know.
Oh, okay, I don't, but,
Well,
but anyway, so that what I could do is, we could do a conference call, we have access to a conference call
Right,
service,
okay.
so that you, Ina, and I, and whoever else could sit and talk, and could talk about it.
Yeah,
And then, so that we can try to do that we can try to do that.
yeah, so
I'll-
we will, on our expense,
Okay.
upload all
Right.
the videos.
Okay, great.
And then post it on the internationalpsychoanalysis.net.
Okay.
And then everyone in the world will know about your
Good,
congress.
because we were gonna do it on YouTube, but Ina did it last year, but not every session. So it's my idea
Yeah.
this year to do
We-
every session. So I will talk. and
We
so she
do
hasn't
it,
got-
we do it on YouTube first.
Right.
And then we take it from YouTube.
Right.
But we'll do the YouTube thing, so you won't
That's
have to do
fabulous.
it.
That's fabulous. So I'll talk to Ina
Wonderful.
whenever I can. And then
We're
the
very
three of
good
us,
at
the
it.
three of us will have a phone conversation, and she's coming
Yeah.
to the June 18th party.
Great.
Oh, wonderful.
Right.
And,
So,
and Larry will be there, he does the work.
perfect.
All right, before we put on too much of this on camera, let me go back to one more point.
Okay, sure.
We've talked about the trauma and the pathology. We also have to talk a little bit, I think, about the talent and the health levels of these individuals who have struggled through so much. There is, if we just stayed with the intergenerational, it would be misread as if only the earliest calamities were the worst and the most prevalent in the pathology, the loss of the object or its love.
Okay.
But it's not so. I mean, these people have tremendous object constancy. Many of the people who I work with, many of the students have enormous sense of otherness and can relate through that otherness to the impoverishment of the patients they're working with. I asked them, I was teaching a lecture on the Oedipus complex, one of the most favorite ideas in psychoanalysis.
Oh, technology. I was wondering how was it. You were saying it was not the favorite ideas in China, but go ahead.
And so
Now, yes.
So I said I didn't want to get into the same conflict that Horney got into with Freud about, you know, that's what men think, but women don't think that because most of my students are women. And so I said to them, how does a woman become a woman? How does a little girl become a woman? And some of the answers I got was, well, I have a daughter who's 3.5, and she feels because her father appreciates her for who she is, and I appreciate her, that she wants to be like us. But she wants to be more like him right now. I think that'll change. Another woman said that she thought she was a little boy. They wanted a little boy because she had an older sister.
Right.
And they treated her like a little boy, dressed her like a little boy, and cut her hair like a little boy until she was 12 and had her menarche and had started menstruating. Then they told her she was a little girl. And this turned her world upside down in many ways, but it made her very strong. And she said she was so glad because she thought that when she got older, she'd get sick like her father, who had that thing between his legs. And she read his genitals as a growth, which was a fascinating relief for her. And something you don't quite hear in cases here, because there is a sort of privacy of the body and of gender.
Except for Lisby Mayer, who wrote the article, "Everybody Must Be Just Like Me," about her daughter who had the same experience looking at her dad in the shower and saying, "What's that thing growing on his vulva?"
So this raises another question. Are there things that are, there's, universal aspects of psychoanalysis, and then there's divergences. So seeing clients in China presenting with certain things, what ways is it similar and what ways is it different than
Maybe this is
in New York City?
I am hard put to see the differences.
Okay.
I don't know about you. But maybe that's me.
I think the differences in patients that I see anyway
Yes.
are, in general, the Chinese patients are smarter
Well,
and have much more difficulty in accessing their feelings.
oh yeah. Well, that's-
Okay.
yeah,
Yes,
okay.
affect.
Yeah, but I was talking about the central conflict.
All of this to me is,
All the conflicts seem to be there.
Right.
But for me, the struggle is the layering of false self and then the issues of trust. How do they really let out what they're feeling? It is so difficult. When we ended our first class, which was the second class of the program, we didn't see far enough ahead to think we should be talking about termination. Because we were ending on, and so in my class, we had two cases. One was presented, and I said after, we haven't talked about the fact that this is the last time we're going to see each other, and maybe ever.
Right.
And so we should talk about that. The students fell to pieces, almost in a Kantian sense. They just sobbed and were overwhelmed. And it wasn't a sudden outburst, it was a talking about it that led to this incredible emptiness and hurt that they were experiencing.
when I came back this time, you know, at the first session with my supervisees, who I've now seen, you know, for 3 programs mostly, they were told that we wouldn't be coming back, right? Because at that point we weren't going to come
Then
back.
they
So
would be
in the
warning
first,
you.
they all came bringing tissues because they said we were going to cry.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, it's enormous,
And-
3
Yeah,
floors
and
worth
of
of
course, when I told them, you know, a couple of sessions later,
Just kidding.
no, I said we changed our mind. They were just overwhelmed. But can you imagine a group coming saying, we're prepared, we're ready to cry?
Right, especially when you're talking about the affects, showing affects is not exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but these people had for 7 years now
Right.
been showing
Long-term,
that
Right,
learning.
right.
in-depth
Right,
object.
and they say, look, they say, we love you,
Uh-huh.
and I say, I love you, and they do. It's it's an
Yeah.
incredibly close relationship.
Well, I mean,
Also,
this isn't worth
yeah.
the book what is.
Yeah,
I agree.
Really?
You're right.
really,
Well,
we should.
Arlene has as a
I have a
diary,
diary.
7
The
years.
framework.
Okay.
She's
Yeah.
kept a record, including all the food we ate.
You can leave that out.
And some of the
Wait,
terrible things we said.
wait, so let me ask, so you were doing that, keeping all the record of food you ate to teach on how to cook?
Hoping,
So,
someday.
And
It all revolves
cases.
around food, it's amazing.
so when Archer said, you know, after all the leaving, just kidding, it reminded me of the old David Steinberg routine about psychoanalysis. You guys must know this.
Tell me, no.
No,
So he's an analyst of some sort, and he says to this client, you know, after they lay down on the couch, he says, you know, open up and tell me everything, free thoughts, and then he jumps on them whenever they say anything. You've got to find it. you've got, I mean, this is, you know, early 70s, so
Yeah.
I have to see if I can find it too, and I'll look you.
yeah.
Just, you know, just kidding, you know, to like, I mean, this is something worthwhile, you know, for so many different ways.
In so many different ways, because some of the struggles that psychoanalysis is dealing with is what is psychoanalysis? When, how, where does it work? Does it require furniture? Does it require frequency?
Right.
Does it require the same country? And you know, there are lots of different parameters around doing psychoanalysis and psychotherapy with patients in a foreign country. When you have a translator who's working with you, they have to not only be able to speak English, they have to know
To
psychoanalysis.
understand psychoanalysis.
Right,
Yeah.
because otherwise they
Distorted.
concretely ideas that you're not trying to say. So what we did was we took students out of the audience who could appreciate psychoanalytic ideas, and we brought them together with the translators, and we asked them to correct one another whenever they thought, and to bring it out, not shamefully, but helpfully to the students. And I said to my class, I'll be the final judge on what I'm trying to say.
That's a great refinement for both sides, for the translator and for the students.
Right. It's not.
And I think the
That's
main-
collaborative, that's a beautiful model, actually, I like that.
I think the main thing about our program, as far as I'm concerned, is that we respond to the needs and requests of the students.
We don't have a colonial model.
Right.
We don't tell them what we think they need. We ask them what they want. And that's the way I run every course.
Those are the courses they get taught. They said they wanted someone who's an expert in self-psychology. We found a person.
Yeah, we found
who's an
Jeffrey
expert in
Stern.
self-psychology.
Okay.
They
want
wanted someone who's
attachment.
an expert in attachment. We got that. So
Okay.
that was how the faculty was formulated.
That love should.
That got disattached.
Right.
Yes, yes.
And
That's a
the history of
dangerous
NYPSC too, right?
The what?
Whatever,
Yes.
whatever the people want, NYPSC gives, right?
Yes.
Well, because you see, China has such a long history
Good luck.
of colonial,
That's
Right.
you know,
Right.
And
Right.
deference.
And
And
definitely,
deference,
And it's a
right.
terrible character
yeah,
defect.
the authoritarianism and the stress.
I was
Well,
there
it's good in
before.
some ways, when the guy at the top said, I'll build you a hospital, it's good.
Yeah.
You deferred to him.
Right, so that was sort of there, and then there was Mao.
I think their vision is far ahead in terms of world and all the details, and making people more conscious in terms of their own functioning and becoming and growing out of the Cultural Revolution and the traumas is first top.
So they asked for an expert on trauma also?
Yes, they did.
Yes, we have an expert on trauma, yes.
We have Janet Michon,
Janet Michon, yes.
and we
Writing a
have,
book on trauma, that hopefully.
yeah, she's writing a whole
published.
book about it because she's really an expert. Has become more of an expert year by year
Yeah.
as she writes these papers in response to their requests.
How about that?
So she has developed in her career so beautifully, it's wonderful.
She was in the Freud reading group with Art.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you started out with a smart person, but
Yeah, no,
she
yeah.
really grew.
Oh,
Yeah,
of course,
she
of course, of course. Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you for
Well-
arranging this meeting.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think we can blame this on Brian for arranging this.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
but then I was supposed to go somewhere
great
else, and then
outcome.
Dennis said to me, well, there's nobody in the China one except Gilda, because I was supposed to go somewhere else, and there are other people now, so
Good.
I
Thank
came
you
here, and I'm
for-
really glad I did.
Yeah, it was very,
I mean,
It's so nice to meet you, really.
he's a terrific fellow.
I can see.
Your group is the best.
To have had us.
I'm familiar with that.
Good.
Yeah, okay. Well, then-
Okay,
So then
terrific.
it's also great, you know, I'm gonna go talk about